This was not merely a war of trenches and artillery. It was not fought only with bayonets, barbed wire, and broken bodies. The First World War was also a financial war. A war waged in gold reserves, bond markets, central banks, and in the quiet offices of financiers who never set foot on the battlefield. Soldiers, paid in blood. Governments and bankers calculated balance sheets, and the decisions made in those years did more than decide who won and who lost. They rewired the global financial system in ways that still shape and trap your life today. If you believe war is only about politics and armies, think again. World War I proved that money is a weapon, and one of the deadliest ever invented. In 1914, Europe was already a powder keg. National rivalries, imperial ambitions, and rigid alliances had turned the continent into a chessboard of paranoia. But beneath the speeches about honor and empire lay a quieter truth. A war of this scale was impossible without unimaginable sums of money. And here is the brutal reality. When leaders chose war, they were also choosing debt. Every empire that marched its troops to the front lines was marching its people into decades of economic burden. At the beginning, most governments believed the war would be short, over by Christmas perhaps. They assumed it could be financed the old way, with gold reserves, limited borrowing, and patriotic donations. Within weeks, that illusion collapsed. The war burned money faster than anyone had imagined. In the summer of 1914, Europe still lived under the gold standard. Paper money could be exchanged for real gold, a system that imposed discipline but also limits. Gold was finite. You could not print endlessly without destroying trust. Britain, France, and Germany all had respectable reserves. But once millions of men were mobilized and entire economies were redirected toward weapons, the costs exploded. By late 1914, Germany was spending over 10 million marks every single day. Britain's daily war costs soon reached £2.5 million. The math was unforgiving. The gold would not last. So governments did the unthinkable. One by one, they suspended the rules. The gold standard was abandoned. And quietly, citizens were told the truth. Money was no longer backed by metal, only by faith in the state. That moment, the breaking of the gold anchor was one of the most important financial shifts in modern history. Once money was untethered from reality, governments discovered something dangerous. They could print, borrow, and persuade without limit. And once they tasted that power, they never went back. Germany's financial war was desperate. Blockaded, isolated, and cut off from global markets, Berlin turned inward. The state launched massive war bond campaigns, urging citizens to pour their savings into patriotic loans. Posters showed heroic soldiers. Families were told to sacrifice. Promises were made. Victory would repay everything. Germany raised over 100 billion marks this way. It was a pyramid built on hope. When defeat came, the bonds were worthless. Millions lost their life savings. And that economic trauma became fertile ground for extremism in the years that followed. Economic history always leaves scars. Britain, by contrast, possessed one decisive advantage. London was the financial heart of the world. Sterling was trusted. British credit reached every continent. At first, Britain relied on short-term borrowing and patriotic appeals. But soon, it tapped into something deeper, global capital. And crucially, it turned to the United States. America was officially neutral in 1914, but its bankers saw opportunity. Firms like J.P. Morgan & Co. became financial lifelines for Britain and France, arranging enormous loans and managing purchases of weapons, food, and raw materials. By the time America entered the war in 1917, Wall Street had already been financing it for years. This was not charity. It was power. the United States emerged transformed, from debtor to creditor, from financial follower to global leader. If you wonder how the 20th century became the American century, this is where it begins, not on battlefields, but in ledgers. France followed a similar path. Already strained by defense spending and haunted by past defeat, it relied heavily on borrowing. French citizens were encouraged to buy bonds, but the deepest pools of money again came from across the Atlantic. By war's end, both Britain and France were bound to American capital, a dependency that would define post-war politics and economic tension. Meanwhile, Russia's financial war collapsed entirely. Its economy was fragile, its banking system weak, and inflation rampant. As faith in the ruble evaporated, the political system followed. The fall of the Tsar was not only ideological, it was financial. By 1918, the scale of the damage was staggering. The Allies had spent over $140 billion. The Central Powers around $60 billion. The gold standard lay in ruins. Inflation tore through economies. Germany would soon face hyperinflation so extreme that bread cost billions of marks. Ordinary people paid the price. Elites, meanwhile, protected themselves by shifting assets abroad, by buying real goods, by staying close to power where information arrived first. The lesson was brutal but clear. In a financial war, the small saver bleeds first. And here is why this story matters to you. World War I taught governments that they could finance the unimaginable by detaching money from reality. They learned they could borrow across borders, print endlessly, sell debt as patriotism, and deal with the consequences later. The playbook never disappeared. Every modern crisis carries echoes of 1914, from the Great Depression to 2008, when authorities say, this is temporary, remember. They said the same thing then. When the guns fell silent, the battlefield extended into balance sheets. The United States held the world's gold. Europe drowned in debt. And a new financial order was born, not by accident, but by design. History does not repeat itself exactly, but it rhymes. And the financial rhyme written in 1914 still governs the world today. Money, once untethered from reality, becomes a tool of control. Real wealth is not numbers on a screen. It is resilience, knowledge, and the ability to see through illusion. That is the only financial freedom history allows.